The airport was buzzing with people rushing in all directions, luggage rolling behind them, announcements echoing through the terminals. Among the crowd, a young black woman stood clutching her passport tightly. Her hands were trembling slightly, but not from fear, more from excitement. She had been waiting for this trip for months. This journey meant everything to her. It was her first solo international flight, and she was going to see her family after a long time. She had also planned to visit a few friends and explore a new city, something she had always dreamed about. Every step she took toward the boarding gate was filled with anticipation, and she couldn't help but smile when she imagined finally hugging her relatives at the airport abroad. As she approached the gate, she noticed the line was unusually crowded. People were shuffling forward, some impatiently tapping their phones, others chatting quietly or keeping to themselves. She adjusted the strap of her bag and tried to stay calm. She had gone through airport security multiple times in her life, but the thought of boarding an international flight alone made her a little nervous. She kept reminding herself that she had everything in order: ticket, passport, boarding pass, and all the travel documents required. Everything seemed perfect. Just as she reached the front of the line, a flight attendant appeared, clipboard in hand, moving with sharp precision. She looked professional, her uniform neat and crisp, her demeanor confident. But there was something in her expression that felt off. She approached the young woman directly, her eyes narrowing slightly as she scanned the boarding pass. "Can I see your passport?" the flight attendant asked in a firm voice. The woman handed over her passport without hesitation, her heart still racing from excitement. She expected a quick glance, a nod, and then she would continue to board. But instead, the flight attendant frowned and flipped through the pages of the passport with a kind of sharpness that made the woman uncomfortable. "Ma'am, this passport isn't valid," the flight attendant said suddenly. Her tone was loud enough that nearby passengers began to glance over. The young woman felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "It's perfectly valid. I've checked everything. It's not expired, and it's exactly what the airline requires." The flight attendant's eyes hardened. "This won't do. You can't board like this." Panic rose in the woman's chest. She tried to explain herself calmly, pointing out the validity dates and the visa stamps, but the attendant's expression didn't soften. Instead, she made a move that the young woman would never forget. With one sudden motion, she grabbed the passport and ripped it. Time seemed to freeze. The young woman's eyes went wide. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Her passport, the key to her journey, her identity, her plans, was in tatters in the hands of this stranger. She tried to reach for it, but the flight attendant held it out of reach, as if the papers themselves could somehow intimidate her. Passengers around them gasped. A few people stepped back, unsure if they should intervene. The young woman's hands were shaking now, her voice cracking. "Why would you do that? That's illegal. That's my property." But the flight attendant didn't respond, only holding the torn passport in front of her like a weapon. The young woman could feel the heat rising to her face, a mix of fear, anger, and humiliation. She had been traveling alone, and now it seemed like the whole terminal was staring at her. She wanted to cry, but she forced herself to stay composed. "Please give it back. I need this to travel." "I haven't done anything wrong," she pleaded. Some passengers began filming on their phones, their faces a mix of shock and outrage. Others whispered to each other, asking what was happening. The atmosphere became tense. The young woman noticed that people were looking at the flight attendant with judgmental eyes now, as if they sensed the unfairness of the act. Finally, someone from the airline staff appeared. A man in a suit approached cautiously, trying to assess the situation. "What's going on here?" he asked, glancing between the flight attendant and the young woman. "This passenger's passport isn't valid," the flight attendant said quickly, still holding the torn pages. The young woman shook her head desperately. "It is valid. I can prove it. Please, you need to look carefully. This is a mistake." The airline staff member looked at the torn passport and frowned. He could see immediately that the pages were genuine and that there was no problem with the documentation. "Ma'am, why did you do this?" he asked the flight attendant. The flight attendant opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. She seemed caught off guard by the sudden attention. Passengers around them started murmuring, expressing their disbelief. "Why would she do that?" one woman whispered. "That's insane." The young woman felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief that someone in authority was noticing the truth, but fear that the ordeal wasn't over. She was alone in a foreign country, facing a person who had tried to ruin her travel experience in front of dozens of strangers. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. "Sir, I didn't do anything wrong," she said again, her voice firmer this time. "I just want to board my flight. Please help me." The airline staff member nodded, his face serious. "We'll sort this out. Ma'am, can you come with me?" The young woman followed him, glancing back at the flight attendant. The woman was now looking uncomfortable, realizing that her actions were being witnessed by too many people and that she could not justify what she had done. The young woman's eyes filled with a mix of triumph and disbelief. She had never imagined that something like this could happen to her, yet here she was, standing strong in the middle of the terminal. As they walked away, some passengers approached the young woman to offer support. "Don't worry, that was completely wrong," one man said quietly. Another woman nodded, whispering, "I can't believe she did that. You didn't deserve it." The young woman smiled faintly, feeling a small sense of comfort in the chaos. She had always known that traveling alone could be challenging, but she had never expected to face such blatant hostility. Her thoughts briefly wandered to the rest of her trip, the flights, the city she would visit, her family waiting for her. She refused to let this moment define her journey. The airline staff led her to a quiet area away from the crowd. There, she was able to explain everything calmly, showing her documents, tickets, and identification. The staff member listened carefully, taking notes and making phone calls to higher management. It was clear that they were taking the situation seriously. Meanwhile, back at the gate, the flight attendant was growing anxious. She could see that the passengers were whispering and staring at her. Some were filming, and she knew that this incident could easily go online. Her confident demeanor had vanished, replaced with uncertainty and fear. The young woman sat down, still clutching the remnants of her passport. Her heart was racing, but she felt a growing sense of relief. She had faced a terrible moment of injustice and managed to remain calm and composed. She knew that things would be handled properly now, and that gave her hope. Even in this stressful situation, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. She thought about her family waiting for her at the destination, about the experiences she had planned, and about the journey that had brought her here. This incident, as painful and shocking as it was, would not stop her. She had faced humiliation, unfairness, and fear, but she had not been broken. Passengers continued to watch, some shaking their heads in disbelief at the actions of the flight attendant, others expressing sympathy for the young woman. A few even approached her to say kind words, reassuring her that she had done nothing wrong and that justice would be served. As she waited, the young woman felt a mix of emotions: shock, anger, relief, and determination. She had been treated unfairly in front of strangers, yet she had maintained her dignity. The support from bystanders and the airline staff gave her strength. She knew that the next steps were out of her hands, but she could control how she reacted. She refused to let this incident ruin her excitement for the trip she had been dreaming about for months. Time passed slowly, but finally, she was able to hear from the airline management. They apologized sincerely for the incident and assured her that the matter would be addressed immediately. The young woman felt a sense of vindication. She had faced an unfair attack and was being treated with the respect she deserved. Even though the incident was far from over, she felt a renewed sense of courage. She realized that standing up calmly in the face of injustice could make a difference. The young woman knew that this moment would stay with her for a long time, but she also knew that it would not define her journey or her spirit. She was determined to continue her trip, stronger and more aware of her own resilience than ever before. The young woman sat in the quiet corner of the terminal, her hands still clutching the torn remnants of her passport. She could feel her heartbeat slowly returning to normal, though the adrenaline still ran through her veins. She glanced around, noticing how passengers whispered to each other, some still glancing at the gate where the incident had occurred. Many had taken out their phones, presumably uploading the video of the confrontation. She didn't feel embarrassed anymore. She felt a strange mix of relief and empowerment. She had faced something unfair and stayed composed. The airline staff member who had taken her aside stayed with her, speaking softly. "We are documenting everything," he said. "The flight attendant's behavior was completely unprofessional, and we will make sure this is handled." She nodded slowly, but her mind was still racing. She thought about how quickly things could escalate, how a simple flight could turn into a nightmare. She had never imagined that a trip she had been dreaming about for months would start this way. But she reminded herself that she had survived the worst of it and now had support. Meanwhile, back at the gate, the flight attendant was growing increasingly tense. She had returned to her post, but she wasn't her usual confident self. Passengers whispered, some glaring at her, and she could see that several had already filmed the incident. The realization that her actions were being witnessed by so many people, possibly online, began to sink in. Her earlier sense of control had completely disappeared. The young woman could hear fragments of conversations from the nearby terminal. Passengers were discussing what had happened, some expressing outrage, others offering their support. "Can you believe she just tore her passport?" one man said. "That's not just wrong, it's crazy." Another woman added, "She didn't deserve that at all. That poor girl." Hearing these words made the young woman feel a little comforted. She realized that people could see the injustice, that witnesses mattered, and that her dignity hadn't been lost. She allowed herself to take a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Fear, anger, humiliation, and determination all swirled together. But she chose to focus on the determination. She refused to let this incident define her. As she waited, airline management arrived to assess the situation fully. They were serious and professional, asking her to recount every detail of what had happened. She explained calmly, describing how the flight attendant had ripped her passport and refused to listen when she tried to explain. She detailed her attempts to stay composed, the reactions of other passengers, and how she had felt humiliated and powerless in that moment. The staff member listened carefully, taking notes and occasionally nodding. "You did everything right," he said. "You stayed calm, and we can see the video evidence as well. This is being taken very seriously." Hearing this, the young woman felt a flicker of relief. For the first time since the incident, she felt that justice might actually be possible. She could feel the weight on her shoulders easing slightly, though she knew the road ahead might still be uncomfortable. Outside the office, she could see passengers who had witnessed the event still talking among themselves. Some had approached other airline staff to report what they had seen. She realized that she was not alone, that the injustice had not gone unnoticed. Strangers had recognized her plight and were standing in their way for fairness. That realization made her feel less vulnerable and more supported. Meanwhile, the flight attendant was facing the opposite scenario. She was summoned to meet with a senior manager, and her confidence had completely evaporated. The manager asked her to explain her actions, but her voice faltered. She could see the severity of the situation, and her earlier sense of authority now seemed like a distant memory. The video footage from passengers' phones was already circulating online, and the realization that her behavior could cost her career began to sink in. Back with the young woman, she was offered water and a seat. The staff member reassured her that she would be able to board her flight once the situation was resolved. "We want to make sure you feel safe and respected," he said. His words were comforting, but she still couldn't shake the memory of the passport being torn. That image had burned itself into her mind, a symbol of unfairness that she had endured calmly. As she sat quietly, she thought about the importance of standing up in moments of injustice. Even though she was alone, she realized that her calmness and composure had drawn attention to the wrongdoing. She had not shouted, not yelled, and had not resorted to confrontation. Instead, she had stayed true to herself, and that had made a difference. Around her, the terminal buzzed with normal activity, passengers moving to and from their gates, announcements echoing across the loudspeakers, luggage wheels rolling across the floors. But the young woman felt a strange sense of clarity. This incident, though unfair and humiliating, had shown her something important. She had the strength to face adversity with dignity, and others had the ability to recognize right from wrong. A few moments later, a small crowd of passengers approached her, some smiling, some nodding in approval. "You handled that really well," one said. "I don't know if I could have stayed calm like that." Another passenger added, "It's shocking what that woman did, but I'm glad you didn't let her ruin your day." Their words were comforting and empowering. The young woman smiled, feeling a connection to these strangers who had witnessed her ordeal and recognized her courage. As the airline management continued their investigation, they reviewed the flight attendant's behavior, the videos from passengers, and the statements of witnesses. It became clear that the actions were entirely inappropriate. The young woman felt a small sense of vindication. She had endured humiliation, but now there was hope that fairness would prevail. Even as the situation unfolded, she couldn't help but reflect on the randomness of such events. She had arrived at the airport full of excitement, ready for her journey, and now she had faced something entirely unexpected. Yet she realized that her reaction had shaped the outcome. By staying calm, she had given the airline staff the opportunity to see the truth clearly. Hours seemed to pass as management made calls, took statements, and reviewed the footage. During this time, the young woman remained composed, though the anxiety of missing her flight lingered. She knew that she might have to wait longer, but she also knew that the matter needed to be resolved properly. She could not risk letting this injustice slide for the sake of convenience. Outside the waiting area, the passengers who had witnessed the event began sharing their experiences on social media. The story began gaining attention quickly, with people expressing outrage and support. The young woman realized that this incident could have consequences far beyond the airport, and she hoped that it would lead to accountability. Through it all, she remained polite and composed, answering questions, explaining her side, and staying patient. Each moment reinforced her belief that dignity and courage mattered more than the anger she had initially felt. She had been wronged, yes, but how she responded to that wrong could make a difference. Finally, after what felt like hours, the airline management approached her with an update. "We have spoken to everyone involved," one staff member said. "We are taking this very seriously, and the flight attendant will face consequences. You will also be able to board your flight safely." Relief washed over her. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. The ordeal had been emotionally draining, but she had maintained her composure and justice was beginning to be served. She could finally focus on the journey that had brought her here, the family waiting for her, and the experiences she had planned. Even in the aftermath of such a traumatic event, she felt stronger. She had endured humiliation and injustice in front of strangers, yet she had emerged resilient. The support from passengers, the professionalism of airline management, and her own courage had combined to turn a nightmare into a story of empowerment. As she prepared to board the plane, she glanced once more at the torn passport in her hands. It no longer felt like a symbol of defeat. Instead, it was a reminder of her resilience, of how she had faced unfair treatment calmly and effectively. She knew that she would never forget this experience, but she also knew that it would not define her. With her belongings in order and a renewed sense of confidence, she walked toward the gate. Passengers who had witnessed the event offered smiles and words of encouragement. The young woman felt a strange warmth in her heart. She had survived an unfair confrontation and in doing so, had proven something important to herself and to others. As she stepped onto the plane, she took a deep breath and allowed herself to feel the excitement she had anticipated for months. The journey ahead still awaited her, full of hope, family, and adventure. The incident at the airport would remain a memory, but it would be a memory of courage, resilience, and the power of staying composed in the face of injustice. She found her seat, settled in, and looked out the window as the plane prepared for takeoff. Though the day had begun with a shocking and unfair encounter, it was ending with a quiet victory. She had faced adversity and maintained her dignity, and that victory felt more important than any flight or destination. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, imagining the places she would go and the people she would see. She had survived the first trial of her journey and was ready for the next. After the young woman was escorted away from the chaotic gate area, she was taken to a quiet office within the airport. The room was simple, with a few chairs and a table, and the hum of airport announcements floated faintly through the walls. She sat down, still holding the torn remnants of her passport, and tried to calm the storm of emotions inside her. Relief was there, but so was lingering anxiety. The memory of the flight attendant's sudden aggression made her stomach churn, and the thought of the confrontation replaying in the videos online was overwhelming. The senior airline manager entered the room shortly after, carrying a tablet and some papers. He greeted her politely and gestured for her to explain everything in her own words. She took a deep breath and recounted the entire incident, starting from when she reached the gate, how the line was crowded and how the flight attendant had abruptly grabbed her passport. She described the disbelief she felt the moment the passport was torn, and the shock that passed through both her and the nearby passengers. As she spoke, the manager nodded seriously, occasionally glancing at the tablet where he was reviewing statements and footage. He asked thoughtful questions, making sure to capture every detail. from her attempts to stay calm to how other passengers had intervened. Her voice was steady, though her hands fidgeted slightly with the torn passport. Each word she spoke reminded her that she had done everything possible to maintain her composure, and it gave her a quiet sense of pride. Meanwhile, the flight attendant was being questioned separately by another team. She appeared tense, her confidence gone. For the first time, the reality of the situation hit her. This incident had been seen by dozens of witnesses, recorded on multiple devices, and could very easily go public. She struggled to explain herself, stammering through weak excuses that sounded hollow even to her own ears. She could see the seriousness in the eyes of the management staff, and she knew deep down that her actions were inexcusable. Back in the quiet office, the young woman noticed that her story was being taken very seriously. The manager thanked her for remaining calm and polite, explaining that the airline was launching a full investigation and would take appropriate actions. He also assured her that she would be able to board her flight safely once the matter was addressed. Hearing this brought her a wave of relief. The humiliation she had experienced moments earlier was slowly giving way to a sense of hope. Outside the office, passengers who had witnessed the event were talking among themselves, and some had posted videos on social media. Within a short time, the story had begun to gain traction online. Comments poured in from people expressing outrage at the flight attendant's behavior and support for the young woman. She had not expected her experience to reach beyond the terminal, but seeing the public reaction reinforced her confidence. People were standing up for her even though she was alone. The airline management monitored the social media attention closely. They saw how viral the incident had become in a short span of time, and they realized that decisive action was necessary. They reviewed the security footage, the statements of the witnesses, and the videos uploaded by passengers. Every piece of evidence showed the flight attendant had acted without reason, violating professional standards and customer rights. The young woman, sitting quietly, felt a mix of anxiety and hope. The situation was now out of her hands, but she trusted that the airline would handle it properly. She reflected on the irony of how quickly things could spiral out of control. What should have been a simple flight had turned into an emotional roller coaster, yet she had survived it without losing her dignity. Her patience and calm had allowed the truth to come forward, and she knew that mattered. As the investigation progressed, the airline management convened a team meeting to discuss the appropriate response. They considered the safety of passengers, the integrity of their staff, and the public perception of the incident. Social media reactions made it clear that people were paying attention, and the airline could not afford to ignore the behavior of the flight attendant. They reviewed policies and past incidents, confirming that what had happened was completely unacceptable and warranted immediate action. Meanwhile, the young woman was offered a place to rest in a lounge while management finalized the steps to resolve the situation. She sat back in the quiet space, reflecting on the ordeal. Even though it had been humiliating, she felt a sense of empowerment. She had maintained her composure, and people could see her dignity. Witnesses had come forward, and her side of the story was being taken seriously. She realized that she had not just survived the incident, she had influenced how it would be handled. Back at the gate, the flight attendant awaited the final decisions from management. She could sense the anger and disappointment around her, not only from management but also from passengers. The crowd that had witnessed the incident looked at her with judgment and disapproval. For the first time, she understood the gravity of her actions and that they could have lasting consequences. The fear and tension were visible in her posture, and she could not hide it. As the young woman waited, airline staff frequently checked on her, ensuring that she felt safe and informed. They reassured her that the matter would be handled promptly, and that the flight attendant's behavior would not go unpunished. She listened to their words, drawing strength from their professionalism and commitment to justice. Every passing moment made her feel a little lighter, a little more in control. Despite the chaos that had unfolded earlier, the incident had already attracted the attention of media outlets because of the videos circulating online. News organizations picked up the story, emphasizing the injustice of the situation and the bravery of the young woman. Public discussions arose about the treatment of passengers, professionalism in the airline industry, and the importance of accountability. She realized that her experience had become a catalyst for a larger conversation, and though she had not sought the attention, she was grateful that her story might help prevent similar incidents in the future. Management made a final decision after reviewing all evidence. They determined that the flight attendant's behavior violated company policies and ethical standards. The young woman's account, supported by videos and witness statements, left no room for doubt. They concluded that immediate termination was necessary to maintain the airline's integrity and assure passengers that such behavior would not be tolerated. When the young woman was informed of the decision, she felt a sense of vindication. The airline management explained that the flight attendant had been fired and that a formal apology would be issued to her. They reassured her that her safety and dignity were their priority and that she would now be able to board her flight without further incident. Relief washed over her as she realized that the ordeal, though emotionally draining, was nearing resolution. She reflected on the support she had received from other passengers, the airline staff, and even strangers on social media. The experience had shown her the power of standing firm in the face of injustice and the importance of maintaining composure. She had faced humiliation, yet she had emerged strong, supported, and validated. As she prepared to board the plane, she noticed how passengers who had witnessed the event now looked at her with respect and empathy. Their reactions made her feel a sense of connection and solidarity. She had been alone at first, but now she realized that in moments of injustice, the support of others, whether they are strangers or authority figures, can make all the difference. Walking toward the gate, she felt a mixture of emotions, relief, pride, and anticipation. She was proud of how she had handled herself and grateful for the support she had received. At the same time, she was eager to finally continue her journey and focus on the excitement that had originally brought her to the airport. The young woman took her seat on the plane, her body still tense but her mind clearer than it had been for hours. The cabin was busy with passengers preparing for departure, but she felt a quiet sense of peace. She reflected on the entire ordeal and realized how much she had learned about herself. She had faced fear, anger, and humiliation, but she had also experienced resilience, courage, and the kindness of strangers. As the plane took off, she looked out the window at the city below, feeling a renewed sense of hope. The airport incident would remain in her memory, but it would not define her. Instead, it would serve as a reminder of her ability to stay composed under pressure and of the importance of standing up for herself. She had faced a challenge she never expected, and she had survived it with dignity. In the following days, the story continued to circulate online. People shared their admiration for the young woman's calmness and bravery, and discussions arose about passenger rights and airline accountability. The young woman received messages of support and encouragement from strangers who had been inspired by her response to the incident. Each message reinforced her belief in the power of dignity, courage, and truth. Even as life began to return to normal, she felt changed by the experience. The incident had been a harsh test, but it had revealed her strength and resilience. She realized that standing up calmly in the face of injustice could influence outcomes in ways she had never imagined. Her confidence grew, and she felt ready to embrace the rest of her journey, knowing that she had handled the first challenge with grace and courage. The young woman smiled quietly to herself as the plane ascended higher into the sky. She was ready to move forward, carrying the lessons of the past hours with her. She had faced humiliation, unfairness, and fear, but she had also discovered strength, resilience, and the impact of calm determination. The incident at the airport had tested her in ways she could never have predicted, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to continue her journey. The young woman had finally boarded the plane, but her mind was not entirely at ease. The memory of her torn passport still lingered, and though the airline had promised to take action, she wondered what consequences the flight attendant would actually face. She could still see the attendant's harsh expression, the suddenness of her aggression, and the way passengers had stared in shock. The humiliation had been intense, but now she had hope. She had survived the worst of it, and justice seemed close. While she settled into her seat, the airline management continued their investigation on the ground. They had gathered statements from passengers, reviewed the video footage, and documented the torn passport. Everything pointed to a clear violation of policy and professional conduct. The flight attendant's actions were not just inappropriate, they were unprovoked and completely unacceptable. The management team met to decide the next steps, knowing that the situation had attracted public attention. Social media posts had gone viral, people were outraged, and the airline's reputation depended on swift and decisive action. Meanwhile, the young woman tried to distract herself from the lingering anxiety. She looked out the window at the city lights below, taking deep breaths as the plane slowly taxied toward the runway. The thought that her journey could finally continue gave her a little comfort. She had dreamed of this trip for months, and despite the chaos, she was still moving forward. She tried to focus on the excitement that had brought her here, the family she would see, the experiences she had planned, and the new city she would explore. Back at the airport, the flight attendant was called into the office for a final meeting with the senior management team. She appeared tense and uneasy, her confident demeanor now completely gone. She tried to explain herself, fumbling through weak excuses about miscommunication and misunderstandings, but the evidence was overwhelming. The statements from passengers, the videos, and the torn passport left no room for doubt. Her actions were completely unjustifiable. The young woman, though still on the plane, could sense that change was coming. She had received updates from the airline staff at intervals, assuring her that the flight attendant would face consequences. Each message brought a mix of relief and anticipation. She realized that this ordeal, while exhausting, was nearing a resolution. The knowledge that fairness was being restored gave her a sense of peace she had not felt since the incident began. After reviewing all evidence and speaking to the flight attendant, the airline management made their decision. The attendant's employment was terminated immediately. It was a firm, unambiguous response that reflected the severity of her actions. The young woman, upon hearing the news, felt a rush of vindication. The person who had caused her humiliation had been held accountable, and she could finally feel a sense of closure. The airline management also issued a formal apology to the young woman. They acknowledged the distress caused by the incident and assured her that they would implement measures to prevent such occurrences in the future. Hearing the apology made her feel respected and valued as a passenger. It reinforced her belief that standing calmly in the face of injustice could lead to meaningful outcomes. As she reflected on the events, she realized how much courage it had taken to remain composed throughout the ordeal. The flight attendant had tried to intimidate her in front of strangers, yet she had stayed calm and polite. Her dignity had been maintained despite the humiliation. Now, with justice served, she felt a renewed sense of confidence in herself. The young woman also thought about the role of the passengers who had witnessed the incident. Their support had been crucial. Some had spoken up, others had recorded videos, and many had shared their outrage online. The collective reaction had ensured that the situation received the attention it deserved. She felt grateful to the strangers who had stood with her in that moment of injustice. Their actions had reminded her that people could be kind and fair, even in unexpected circumstances. While the plane ascended into the sky, she allowed herself to relax a little. The memory of the confrontation still lingered, but it was now paired with the satisfaction of seeing fairness restored. The incident had tested her patience, resilience, and composure, but she had emerged stronger. She realized that facing adversity did not always mean fighting with anger. Sometimes it meant staying calm, letting the truth be seen, and trusting that justice would follow. During the flight, she thought about how she would share this experience with her family. She knew they would be concerned at first, but she also wanted them to understand the courage it had taken to remain composed. She wanted them to know that even in difficult situations, one could maintain dignity and influence outcomes positively. The story, though painful, was also one of empowerment. Back at the airport, news of the termination spread quickly. Passengers who had witnessed the incident, as well as others who had learned about it online, expressed satisfaction that the airline had taken decisive action. Discussions arose about the importance of passenger rights and professional conduct in the airline industry. The young woman's experience became a case study in handling unfair treatment, and her calm response was praised widely. The young woman reflected on how quickly situations could escalate. One moment she had been excited and nervous for her journey, and the next she had faced unexpected hostility and humiliation. Yet through the chaos she had discovered her inner strength. The incident had forced her to confront fear, anger, and helplessness, but it had also shown her the power of composure and self-respect. As the flight continued, she thought about the lessons she had learned. She had learned that standing up calmly could influence outcomes, that witnesses mattered, and that institutional accountability was possible when wrong actions were confronted. She realized that she could take these lessons into other areas of her life. The experience had been traumatic, yes, but it had also been instructive and empowering. She also considered the importance of empathy and support from others. Without the passengers who intervened, without the management team that listened and acted, and without strangers who voiced their outrage online, the outcome might have been different. She felt grateful for the collective sense of fairness that had come together to support her. The incident had reminded her that even in moments of personal struggle, people could make a difference by standing up for what is right. As the hours passed, she allowed herself to feel the weight of the experience lift. She was still cautious and alert, but a sense of closure had begun to settle over her. She had faced injustice directly, maintained her dignity, and now seen accountability. It was a profound realization, one that left her both relieved and empowered. She thought about her plans at the destination, seeing family, visiting friends, exploring the city, and felt a renewed excitement. The journey she had dreamed of for months was still ahead of her, and she could finally focus on it without the shadow of the airport incident looming over her. Her thoughts were filled with anticipation for the experiences that awaited her, and the sense of relief allowed her to feel genuine joy for the first time since the confrontation. The young woman also reflected on the resilience she had discovered within herself. Facing a sudden, unfair attack had been terrifying, but it had revealed her ability to remain composed, articulate, and firm without resorting to anger or retaliation. This realization strengthened her confidence and left her feeling capable of handling future challenges with grace. Throughout the flight, she reviewed the sequence of events in her mind. She acknowledged the fear and shock she had initially felt, but she also recognized the moments where she had acted with courage. She had spoken calmly, presented her documents clearly, and cooperated with airline management, all while maintaining her dignity. These actions had contributed directly to the resolution of the situation. As the plane approached her destination, the young woman felt a profound sense of relief and triumph. The ordeal had been challenging and emotionally exhausting, but she had navigated it successfully. She had faced unfair treatment, public humiliation, and fear, yet she had emerged stronger and validated. The knowledge that the flight attendant had been held accountable brought her a deep sense of justice and closure. Landing at the airport, she gathered her belongings and prepared to meet her family. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The confrontation, the investigation, and the eventual resolution had taken a toll, but they had also provided valuable lessons in resilience, composure, and the importance of accountability. She walked through the terminal with her head held high, proud of how she had handled herself. Passengers who had learned about the incident on social media continued to express support and admiration. Comments highlighted her courage, patience, and dignity, praising her response to a difficult situation. The story became an example of how standing firm calmly could influence outcomes and inspire others. She felt humbled and encouraged by the positive reactions, realizing that her experience had resonated with people far beyond the airport. As she stepped outside the terminal, feeling the cool air on her face, she allowed herself to reflect on the journey she had endured. The incident had tested her in ways she could never have anticipated, but it had also revealed her strength and resilience. She had maintained her dignity, inspired witnesses, and seen justice served. It was an empowering realization, one that would stay with her for a long time. The young woman finally embraced her family, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief and joy. The journey she had dreamed of for months was now fully underway, and the earlier incident, though painful, had reinforced her sense of courage and self-respect. She knew that she had navigated a difficult situation successfully, and that her ability to stay composed had made a difference. The young woman had finally arrived at her destination, and the initial rush of relief at stepping off the plane was overwhelming. The ordeal at the airport, the torn passport, the confrontation, the humiliation was behind her now, and she could breathe more freely. But even as she walked through the arrivals hall, she carried the memory of everything that had happened. It had been exhausting, both mentally and emotionally, yet she felt a quiet strength growing within her. Her family was waiting for her, their faces lighting up as they saw her approach. Hugs were exchanged and tears of joy flowed freely. She tried to smile, but part of her mind still replayed the shocking moment when her passport had been ripped. Despite the relief of finally being with her loved ones, she realized that the emotional impact of the incident would linger for a while. It was a strange combination of exhaustion, relief, and lingering disbelief that anyone could act so recklessly and unfairly. Sitting with her family later, recounting the journey so far, she noticed how much she had grown from the experience. She spoke calmly, explaining what had happened at the airport, how the flight attendant had ripped her passport, and how the airline had ultimately taken decisive action. Her family listened intently, offering words of comfort and pride. They admired her ability to stay composed under pressure and recognized the courage it had taken to face such an unfair situation alone. As the days passed, she began to reflect more deeply on the incident. Initially, she had focused on the fear and anger she had felt, but now she considered what she had learned. She realized that the event, while deeply unsettling, had revealed something important about herself. She had the ability to stay calm, assert her rights, and maintain her dignity, even in the most challenging circumstances. This awareness brought a sense of empowerment she hadn't anticipated. She also thought about the passengers who had witnessed the confrontation. Their support had been invaluable, even if subtle. Some had spoken up. Others had filmed the incident, and many had shared it online, ensuring that her side of the story reached a wider audience. She understood now that her courage, combined with the courage of strangers, had made the difference. The incident could have gone very differently if no one had intervened or paid attention. The airline's response had also left a lasting impression on her. The management had acted quickly, reviewed the evidence thoroughly, and taken decisive action against the flight attendant. The formal apology they issued made her feel respected and validated. She realized that while injustice can happen suddenly, accountability and fairness are possible when people in positions of authority take responsibility. Even as she enjoyed her time with her family and explored the new city, she found herself occasionally thinking back to the airport. She considered the strength it had taken to remain composed in the face of humiliation and unfairness. The incident had been traumatic, but it had also been a test of her resilience. She felt proud of how she had handled herself, and that pride gave her confidence in facing future challenges, no matter how unexpected they might be. In the following days, she received messages and comments from people who had seen the videos online. Many praised her composure, courage, and dignity, noting that it was inspiring to see someone remain calm in such a stressful situation. She felt a mix of humility and gratitude. She hadn't intended for her experience to be shared widely, but knowing that it had inspired others reinforced the idea that standing up calmly in the face of injustice can have a meaningful impact. Her thoughts also turned to the concept of resilience. She realized that resilience wasn't just about enduring difficult situations. It was about responding to them in a way that preserved one's dignity and integrity. She had faced an unexpected, unfair attack, yet she had stayed composed and clear-headed. This experience had taught her that inner strength is something you discover in moments of adversity. The young woman also reflected on the role of fairness and accountability. The flight attendant's termination was a clear example that actions have consequences. Witnessing this outcome reinforced her belief in justice and reminded her that systems can work when people speak up and act responsibly. She understood that the incident, though deeply personal, had larger implications about professionalism, human behavior, and the importance of treating others with respect. As she continued her trip, she allowed herself to enjoy the experiences she had been anticipating. Visiting family, exploring the city, and connecting with friends brought her joy and helped her gradually release the tension and anxiety from the airport incident. She felt freer, more present, and increasingly focused on the positive aspects of her journey. The sense of triumph she felt over surviving the ordeal added a layer of empowerment to everything she did. The young woman also began to consider how she might use this experience to help others. She thought about sharing her story in a way that emphasized courage, calmness, and standing up for oneself. She realized that many people might face unfair situations, and seeing an example of how to handle them with dignity could be valuable. She felt a sense of purpose emerging from her ordeal, a desire to show that even in moments of injustice, one can maintain strength and integrity. Reflecting further, she thought about the lessons in empathy she had learned. She had experienced cruelty and unfair treatment firsthand, but she had also witnessed kindness and support from strangers, airline staff, and her family. This contrast reinforced her belief in human goodness and the importance of standing up not just for oneself, but also for others. who may be vulnerable or mistreated. She felt a renewed commitment to empathy and fairness in her own actions. As the trip progressed, she also noticed how her confidence had grown. She had faced a situation many would find overwhelming, yet she had handled it with poise. This newfound confidence extended beyond the airport incident. It influenced how she approached new experiences, interacted with strangers, and managed challenges that arose during her travels. She felt more capable, more assertive, and more grounded in herself. Even the memory of the torn passport began to shift. Initially, it had represented humiliation and fear, but now she saw it differently. It became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that she had faced an unfair attack, stayed composed, and ultimately witnessed accountability and justice. The torn pages were no longer a source of pain. They were a testament to her strength and ability to navigate adversity. Throughout her journey, she also reflected on the importance of preparation and patience. She had taken the necessary steps to ensure her travel documents were correct, yet the unexpected confrontation had still occurred. She realized that preparation alone was not enough. How one responds to challenges is equally important. Her calm, measured response had made all the difference, and she felt proud of the way she had handled the situation. The young woman also considered the broader implications of her experience. It highlighted issues of professionalism, respect, and accountability in the airline industry. It showed how public attention and witness support could influence outcomes. And most importantly, it demonstrated that individual courage, staying composed, and standing up calmly for one's rights can create meaningful change. As she prepared to return home after her trip, she felt a profound sense of closure. The airport incident, which had initially been a source of fear and anxiety, had become a story of resilience, justice, and personal growth. She had survived a moment of unfairness, maintained her dignity, and seen accountability take place. She felt stronger and more self-assured, ready to face whatever challenges might come in the future. In the quiet moments of her journey back, she thought about how much she had learned about herself. She had discovered courage she hadn't known she possessed, resilience in the face of adversity, and the importance of composure and dignity. These lessons would stay with her long after her travels ended, influencing how she approached both challenges and opportunities in her life. The young woman realized that her experience had changed her perspective on unfairness and adversity. She no longer feared encountering unexpected challenges. Instead, she approached them with confidence, knowing that she had the ability to respond calmly, assert her rights, and maintain her dignity. She had been tested, and she had passed with strength and grace. As she finally stepped back into her home city, surrounded by familiar sights and loved ones, she felt a sense of triumph and gratitude. The ordeal at the airport was behind her, but its lessons remained vivid and valuable. She had endured humiliation, fear,